I can only recall one dream we had in which he was crawling on the wall and ceiling like a spider. Ew, that's vile. 7 of the 20 children in the class had Alex listed as a friend. There is no Alex in our entire school. Girl, have you not learned not to talk to yourself? That is how you conjured up this imaginary friend in the first place, in the mirror. My brother said he knew right away that Doorknob wasn't human and wasn't good. He still doesn't like talking about it. Oh my god, Doorknob, get a life. Why wake the brother up? Like, what? You just had to have the last laugh there, didn't you? And welcome to a new episode of Real Spooky Stories, the place where I tell your real spooky stories. If you would like to share your story or you have any topic you want me to cover, give me a little email on realspookystoriespodcast@gmail.com, or you can click any of the social media linked below and get in touch that way. Right, I'm just going to get straight into this episode because I am so annoyed. I recorded this episode literally a few weeks back, and it was like 50 minutes long, more than that even actually, and I've literally just finished editing it. And you know, at the start where you put like little clips of the voice notes, I didn't save the original long edited. By the time it was edited, it was like 40 minutes. I didn't save that, and then I edited it and trimmed it to like 9 seconds long. So the literally whole thing deleted, and stupid Apple doesn't have, I know, that was the dog, he agrees, stupid Apple doesn't have the option for me to just revert it back, because like, I'm so annoyed. I am so annoyed. So I'm going to have to do them all again. But it won't make a difference to you, it just makes a difference to me. So if I sound a bit snappy and angry, that's why, alright? Alright, I'm going to rant over now. So, this episode is Imaginary Friends. What do we think on imaginary friends? Did you have an imaginary friend? Like, you know, I don't know what I feel like. And I remember me and my sister, we did have them. But I feel like we just made them because people knew that kids have imaginary friends, and we just made them for the thing of like we wanted them, but they were actually imaginary. Like, we couldn't see them in real life, you know what I mean? Oh my god, I'm so annoyed. I'm so sorry. Okay, anyway, right, so we're gonna go into the first story, and this one is taken from the subreddit Paranormal Encounters, and it is by the user zestyclose_read_360. So they've put like, did anyone else have an imaginary friends as a child, or any creepy stories about this? And they've written like a few sentences, and then the main comment is like a big story, so I'll read that, if you know what I mean. So the original post says, I myself had a childhood imaginary friend. I don't remember much about her, other than her name, which I believe I obviously made up. Her name was Periana. This is also, oddly enough, the name of a city in Spain. I'm not sure how I came up with this. I'd like to hear your stories if you have any. So the comment, which is the actual like story I'm going to read, is by Debts Chrissy. So, my brother had an imaginary friend when he was in preschool/kindergarten age. Oh my gosh, it was creepy and funny. It all started when we moved one of Mexico's biggest cities, Guadalajara, sorry if I said that wrong, Guadalajara, to a very rural area of the state. Lots of hills and springs of water, little rivers and nature. It was beautiful. However, as more people moved to the area and started to build homes around the springs, there was a lot of flooding when it was rain season. Also, with more isolated places comes crimes like anywhere in the world. A lot of the time, people got killed or drowned in the streams of water downhill, arroyitos in Spanish. No one would find out because it would drag everything. Sometimes people would stay all the way out to a place what they called Cola de Caballo, Hose's Tail, and it's the state of Jalisco. Sorry if I said that wrong. I'm sorry if I'm saying all of these names wrong, by the way. Well, that's just so you'd have some background on the story of his imaginary friend. His name was Tonito, or Little Tony if you were to translate it. Tonito would suddenly drop/lose all of his clothing while on our walk to school or church or the market, and we would have to stop and help my brother pick up all of Tonito's clothing. Like, randomly, my brother would cry in distress. Tonito's clothing fell off. I have to help him pick it up. Wait for me. He needs my help picking up his clothing. We would just laugh and thought he was just being a funny kid. He's 5 years younger than me, so when this was happening, I was in 2nd grade and he was about to start kindergarten. I remember this at the time when the 2nd floor to our home was being built and the construction workers, who obviously were family, lol, used the restroom to get changed out of their work clothing, and my brother used a broomstick to lock the restroom door, lol. Imagine a kindergarten locking adult man in the restroom because Tonito didn't like them. Another thing that used to get my brother in trouble with our mother was that he would pee in her lime tree because Tonito was jealous he couldn't eat cucumber with lime juice anymore, so he killed our lime tree with pee. I don't remember much, but my mother says one night my brother was crying on his bed, and when she went to check on him, he told her Tonito's story of how he died and became a ghost. Supposedly Tonito told my brother he got lost on his way to school, some bad guy invited him inside his house, and then killed him, to finally leave his body downhill on the stream of water to be dragged God knows where. The worst part is that my brother wanted to take the police to the guy's house, because every time we would walk past his house, Tonito would lose all of his clothes there out of fear. I remember it being a white house where it was said the guy sold drugs. But who knows, I was in 2nd grade, we left to live in the US when I was in 6th grade, so all those years in between are mostly grey areas. My brother eventually stopped seeing Tonito, but I don't know what my mother did to make him go away. We are Catholic, so I'm sure she brought a priest to bless the house or something like that. I remember it was a year or two thing, no more than that. My brother says he doesn't remember any of it, and that's it, the story of Tonito. Oh, that's quite sad for Tonito. Someone's commented, I feel really bad for Tonito, he didn't get his justice and he got stuck here. Oh yeah, he did. Oh, poor little Tonito. So the comment is by somebody called strawberry_crocodile, and it's like their story, so I'm going to read this one. When I was 7 or 8, I lived in NC. I was a pretty weird kid, always playing with rocks or animals or watching scary stuff with my dad. I didn't quite fit in anywhere. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house and had the habit of talking to the mirror, tell us about my day and what I was doing in school, or about the animals I saw in the woods behind my grandparents' house. Eventually I spoke to my imaginary friend wherever I was. I didn't need a mirror, she was with me everywhere. My grandmother asked me if I was using the phone at night, because she heard me talking to someone, laughing, and I explained that it was my imaginary friend Amanda. I'd never called her anything before, the name just came to me in that moment. She didn't say much and let me go on my way. After a few days, she asked me if Amanda spoke back to me. I laughed and told her I did most of the talking, but she started to watch me carefully. The next day it was raining and it had been thundering for hours. The power had gone out and we all sat in the back living room by candlelight. As I lay on the carpet, reading under candlelight, when I looked up again, I was alone. I went to go to sleep in my great-grandmother's room, but the door was locked. My grandmother was watching Billy Graham on TV. Sunday church was boring enough. No way I was going to listen to it when I didn't have to. I went back to the living room and lit a candle, even though I wasn't supposed to. I kept reading for a while, and then I saw a movement down the dark hallway. I was scared at that point. The living room and the spare bedroom I stayed in was in the same room where I was, and down the hall was the bathroom, the bedrooms, the kitchen, and a utility room. After a few seconds, I heard something whisper my name so weakly. It was faint like noise you hear within other noise. I called my grandmother's names and got no response. I lit another candle and cried. In a moment I heard my name louder, just as thunder screamed outside. The 3 or 4 candles I had lit blew out together and I sat in the dark, clearly not alone. I heard a dragging sound getting louder and I finally screamed. My grandmother ran out of her room but stepped back into her room quickly. She came back out with a small pouch and a book. She told me to go in the back room and lock the door and cover my ears. She told me not to open the door for anything until morning. I was so afraid to walk past the hallway to get to the other room, I was frozen. I started to crawl and promised myself not to look. I heard my grandmother speaking angrily in Spanish to something, and at the far end of the hallway, where the front doors were and most of the windows, I saw a deep black shape as tall as the ceiling in the darkness. I ran to the other room and heard a crash. I remember standing by the door with my hand on the knob for a few minutes when I heard my grandmother's door close. A few minutes later, I heard a gentle voice at my door calling my name. I felt myself touching the lock when I stopped and sat on the bed. Neither of my grandmothers called me by my name. They called me a pet name. I didn't open the door and I sat there for the next few hours until the sun rose. I came out, my grandmother's told me to never speak to Amanda again. WTF. She's dead now, so I'll never know what happened. So I'll never know what the hell happened that night. Now I just talk to myself, no more imaginary friends. Girl, have you not learned not to talk to yourself? That is how you conjured up this imaginary friend in the first place, in the mirror. Maybe just get a little diary. Yeah, maybe write it on paper and not put them words out into the universe by sound. You know what I mean? Somebody else has commented on this and the user is called zealousIdeal_I8669. I had one when I was a kid. I named him Doorknob because he had a big nose. He stuck around and I realised he was not my friend at all. He would tell me to harm myself and my family. He He followed me around everywhere I went and honestly scared the crap out of me. It wasn't until I was around 11 that I cried and prayed over the Bible that he would go away that he actually left me. Not before he woke my younger brother up, 9, male, to say goodbye through the window. My brother nailed blankets to the window for years after that. My brother said he knew right away that doorknob wasn't human and wasn't good. He still doesn't like talking about it. Oh my god, doorknob, get a life. Why wake the brother up? Like, what? You just had to have the last laugh there, didn't you? Like, so cheeky. Okay, so the second story of today is from the subreddit Paranormal Encounters. It is from the user JaggyLover23, and it is titled, Me and my sisters shared imaginary friend attacked us every night. I don't use Reddit, but I remembered this recently and thought I would share it here. When I was very little, I would often play in the park, within driving distance of my house quite often. I hardly saw my friends outside of school, and my siblings were either not there this specific time or were playing without me, and I was a very socially awkward child, so I didn't want to approach anyone. But one time, I was very bored and lonely at this park, and I decided to make up a friend to play with. I named him Thomas, and he was slightly older and taller than me, and had short black hair. I don't recall what we did at the park, but I brought him home with me afterwards. Fast forward a while, and me and my older sister began having joint night terrors involving him. We both slept in the same room at this time. I can only recall one dream we had, in which he was crawling on the wall and ceiling like a spider. Ew, that's vile. It was only at this time that I found out that my older sister had an imaginary friend that looked exactly like him, and was also called Thomas. In addition, my elder sister, who slept in a different room, also had this imaginary friend when she was around my age. It's crazy because I genuinely thought I made him up on the spot at the time. I asked my sister about it, and turns out she also remembered him at pretty much the exact same time I did. I'm not sure what this means. Additionally, whenever we had one of these night terrors, we would wake up with long scratches on our bodies. Waking up with the scratches on my body continued for years after the night terrors actually stopped. Sometimes they were in places that I could have accidentally scratched myself in the night, but sometimes they would end up places that would be impossible for me to have reached. Me and my sister did not share a bed, so it couldn't have been her either. I believe my mother, being a Christian, assumed he was a demon or something similar, and did some prayers over the house to get rid of him. But thinking about it now, I wondered if he ever actually left me alone. I kept waking up with scratches for a long time after, and for as long as I can remember, I have always considered myself unlucky. Additionally, the synchronicity between me and my sister remembering him at the same time makes me wonder if he's going to come back soon, as we are planning to move house in the near future. I've always considered myself a skeptic when it comes to supernatural, but I just can't explain this occurrence. I've asked about this, and it definitely happened. There is a 0% chance my sister is lying about this happening to us. That is quite weird, but also, I feel like if you had this imaginary friend, did you not mention him around your sister or anything? Not like directly, maybe, just maybe indirectly, or she saw you playing and said to your mum, like, who's she playing with? And your mum was like, oh, Thomas, and then, oh, I don't know, or like, did she, I know you don't remember things when you're a kid, maybe you played together with her, with him, and that's why she had the same one. But that doesn't explain why he's crawling on the ceiling like an absolutely vile spider. It doesn't explain the scratches on your body, which is also disgusting. Don't scratch kids or little girls, okay? And I love how your mum just jumped to the fact that he was a demon. Ooh, someone's commented, this user's called Maleficent Purple 148. This reminds me of what happened to one of my cousins when we were younger. We have a little bit of an age difference by 4 to 5 years, I believe, but we were close until our grandpa died, and there was a huge family divide, and we didn't get to see each other after that. Anyways, she used to have this friend called the Yellow Boy. Her parents didn't think anything of it, but imagination. But her younger sister kept getting these like things on her legs, and they were all scabbed up all the time, and they took her to the doctors and couldn't figure it out. My cousin told her parents one day that the Yellow Boy did not like her little stepsister and would take the scabs off his legs and put them on her. Later on, the dad was mushroom hunting near the home and discovered a cemetery nearby with a child who died of yellow fever. Not sure how true all of this is or was, but it has stuck with me all these years. Aww, that's strange and sad and weird and whole lot of things. This third story is from the subreddit Paranormal Encounters, and it is by the user Mau Becker, and it is titled Haunted School. I teach kindergarten in a building that is over 100 years old, built in 1907, and is on the National Register of Historic Places. My classroom is on the second of 4 levels. We don't use the top level at all because it's in total disrepair. Sometimes the auto-flush toilet flushes on its own. Sometimes things fall off shelves. Sometimes the lights flicker for just a moment. I figured it's an old building, that's why. Anyway, last year around parent-teacher conference time, I sent home a little questionnaire for parents asking what they would like to discuss at the conference. One of the questions was, what friends from school does your child talk about at home? Social and friendship skills are a big part of kindergarten, that's why I ask. 7 of the 20 children in the class had Alex listed as a friend. There is no Alex in our entire school. I asked them who Alex was. Imaginary friends are common in young children, but for them all to have the same name was quite unsettling. They said things like, the quiet boy, he sits on the stool by the bookshelf always, he cries a lot. I figured it was just their imaginations and they talked to each other about it. Then, yesterday we were doing a tidy up of the classroom. I moved some furniture around. One of the kids came up to me and said, Mrs. Marmal, Alex wants you to put the stool back by the bookshelf so he can look out the window when you read stories. Aww. Someone commented, can you do any research of the building? I was going to say this. And the OP is put back. I plan to take some of our paranormal investigation tools that I have and see if I can get some EVPs when the children have gone home for the day. It's hard though because there's always background noise in a school and our building is at the intersection of 2 major streets in a large city. Do not do EVPs or a ghost hunt and conjure spirits in a child's classroom. Are you okay, Mama Becca? Please don't do that. I feel bad for Alex and why is he sitting on the little stool and like, I would be like, what do you look like? What, asking, and I'd be asking the other teachers in the school what if they know about anything called Alex or a kid called Alex. Also, I don't believe that there's no Alex in your whole school. This next story is from the subreddit The Truth Is Here, and it is by the user Actual V. It is titled An Imaginary Friend That Wasn't All That Imaginary. My parents claim that when I was younger, I had an imaginary friend. I didn't think that this was anything special since plenty of kids supposedly have them, but I couldn't remember anything about having one, so I thought they were joking when they mentioned it in passing. They looked at me very seriously when I told them I had no clue what they were going on about. They then asked, are you sure you don't remember anything? And I shook my head, I really had no clue. So they told me about my imaginary friend, Jin. I have no idea how to spell the name, only know this is what it sounded like, and frankly, I don't know what to make of it. My parents are superstitious, being Filipino and all, it runs in our culture. So when I'd started talking into empty spaces and asking for an extra set of plates on the food at the table at around the age of 2 or 3, my parents felt something was up. I was an only child at the time, so they brushed off having an imaginary friend as some sort of coping mechanism for whenever I was lonely, but they still had their worries. He followed me around from our home in the Philippines all the way to the UK, where we are now, which eased them a bit, having been used to hearing stories about ghosts inhabiting homes, so they were sure it was just my active imagination. It wasn't until I started calling him a ghost and complaining about only having ghosts to speak to that they got really worried. It was this that spurred them into thinking about having more kids sooner than later, and around a year later, I was told I was going to be a big sister. They thought this would cause my friend to leave, but to no avail. If anything, things got weirder. My mother started experiencing strange things in our home. She used to hear running in the hallway. She'd have frequent nightmares, photographs would fall off the wall at night, and only at night I started reporting weird things, like cutlery floating and my toys making sounds by themselves. One time that really stood out to my mother was when she'd taken me with her for a handover to the hospital to then pass me off to my dad who was finishing his shift. Supposedly, we'd been walking down a corridor when I'd stopped walking when we got to a set of stairs and pointed to the top, asking her why there was a lady without a head. I was still very young at this point, so I was more curious than anything, but my mother was terrified, so she rushed to find my dad and ran us out of the hospital as quickly as possible. After my sister was born, I spent less and less time with my imaginary friend. I was busy having started school at this age and a little sister to look after. I loved the responsibility and have fun pouring their formula and looking after them when my parents were cooking, etc. So when my mother got pregnant again and my little brother was born, they had almost forgotten about my imaginary friend. Then I started to get ill. My attendance went down at primary school, and it got so bad that my parents were called in often to talk to the school about my illnesses. I was off for at least 3 to 4 weeks a year because of a recurring flu or infection. Sorry, 3 to 4 weeks a year isn't even that much. There's 52 weeks in a year. So you were in school for 48 weeks. I mean, I know you have a lot of time off school anyway, but 4 weeks isn't that much. You know what I mean? And then one day, a day that I even remember, my parents were downstairs cooking dinner and I was upstairs looking after my siblings. One moment, I'm playing Super Mario on my Game Boy. The next, I hear multiple thuds all the way down the stairs before silence and a loud cry from downstairs. When I leave the room, I noticed the baby gate at the stairs was open and my sister was crying at the bottom of the stairs. My parents rushed her to hospital and thankfully she only had a few bruises but she was fine. They thought I forgot to close the gate, but when it happened again, only to my younger brother, they started to worry if it was really my fault. It wasn't, by the way. After my sister's initial fall, I got so scared that I always made sure to check the damn gate when they asked me to look after him again. For a good while, I really did think it was my fault too, but but I remember checking those gates and I remember them being closed every time. So when my brother fell, I had no idea what to say to parents except sorry, which was probably a sure sign of guilt to them. Then one day, out of the blue, I told them Jin said he's going home now. When they asked me where Jin was going to go, or if there was a reason why, I only shrugged my shoulders. They kept asking more questions, but all I could say was that he was going home. He wasn't going to stay here anymore. Things quietened down after that, and supposedly they stopped altogether when we moved houses. I had no idea that everything before those falls had occurred. I don't remember having an imaginary friend. I don't remember speaking to him. I don't remember the hospital or any of the cutlery moving. So much of this was news to me that I really thought my parents were making it up, but they still swear by each of these experiences. Even my grandparents had agreed when we visited them in the Philippines that even when I was very young, this Jin was an invisible playmate that everyone knew of. Maybe I have a bad case of childhood amnesia, but it worries me that I supposedly did a lot of weird things without having any memory of it. But everyone else seems to remember it like it was yesterday. Does anyone have any imaginary friends like this, or know of anyone who did? I've asked all of my friends and no one even thought they were a real thing until I told them my story. Many who I've told it to said that I was just a creepy kid, and others that Jin probably wasn't a normal imaginary friend, but I'm undecided, if not spooked, about what younger me apparently got up to. Edit. Thanks for all the comments. It's somewhat a relief to see that it's not just me with a creepy imaginary friend, and can't exactly remember a lot either. It's true that we don't really start to retain memories until a certain age, frustrating as it is, but it explains why I don't really remember most of it. I've done a bit of research on the Jin, and I'm not sure if that's exactly what it was. Of course, I can't be certain, but if they're as bad as the internet claims, then I hope I don't run into it again. I'm banking on it being a spirit of some kind. I had no idea it was also a Filipino name, so that really might be its name, and I hope that if it was a spirit that I found peace. I know it sounds fake at times, but my parents, especially my mother, truly believes in what she's told me. Even my dad, who doesn't like speaking about these things, he's more superstitious, so he tries to be careful about speaking of the paranormal. Openly agreed with her. Thanks for all the replies. Yeah, someone, just on that Jin thing, someone's commented, a Jin is also the name of a spirit. Strange. Also, yeah, I find it strange that we don't remember things. Like, it's weird that we, you in this instance, had an actual friend who you actually sat there and played with. All your family remember you playing with them. You actually sat there and spent some of your life playing with this friend who you don't remember. Like, that's really weird. And I know, I feel like I remember things from when I was like a toddler, so I don't understand why we don't remember things like this. It's just, especially that hospital thing. Like, I don't know, it's just a weird, I just find it weird that we don't remember things. That was the end of the real stories for today. Of course, it's CreepyPasta time. I just want to say about them stories that obviously all linked below as always. They have a lot of comments on, like, people replying saying, oh, I had a similar experience to this, or people replying with their own stories. So I urge you to go and read them because there is lots. Maybe get a nice little cuppa, put a little Halloween ambience on in the background and read some stories. What a lovely night. Light a few candles. I just hope you don't see Amanda. Okay, so it's CreepyPasta. CreepyPasta time. So this one, I've heard this one before, right? And when I think of imaginary friends, this is the one I think of. It's not really, I don't know, it's like imaginary friend vibes. I'm not really sure if it's fully imaginary friend, but it's just the vibe, you know? And it sounds like some of the things what people have said today to an extent. But as I always say, and I know this is real spooky stories, this one isn't a real story. It's taken from CreepyPasta. This user that has posted this on the CreepyPasta Reddit, they posted this 12 years ago, but they've wrote, and I'll read it as well, they found the real CreepyPasta story and they aren't the one who actually wrote it originally, but they've said that anyway, so I'm not sure who actually wrote the real story, but they've like said don't credit me like as writing the story because it's not them who wrote it. So the user who posted this, which is the one I've just said, didn't actually write it, but they found it, so hats off to them anyway, is called Plumage, and the story is called Mr. Widemouth. I found this story on the CreepyPasta website about a year ago. It is definitely one of the best scary stories I've ever read. It's a long one, so be prepared. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless, chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft afloat on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they were made just yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring, but in my heart I know they are real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute of my father's workplace. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my things were already packed in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was by far the largest. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, the toy, the little robot with the big ears. You can pet or feed them almost like a real pet." "Oh," Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend." I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped to check in on me. "I lay under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. The 3rd or 4th morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and took my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look out at the ground below. We were on the 2nd story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle the drop was farther than the 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to play pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I pretend that there is a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try." I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of scepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. "I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt." Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of his day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived, holding a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons." I looked in the box. It was full of knives. It was full of knives! "Mr. Widemouth, where are you getting these knives anyway?" It was full of knives. Okay, sorry. "My parents would kill me," I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth has brought knives into my room, objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. "I'll be spanked and grounded for a year." Mr. Widemouth frowned. "It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it." I pushed the box away. "I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air." Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying he put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had the permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning for the feeling of sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look because then he said, "It's safe, I promise." I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house. "This is an important path," he explained. "I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there." I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond the trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last loads of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I'd be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a 6-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon rather than one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "Mate, how is 6 energy drinks getting you through 2 days? 6 would get me through like 6 hours. Yeah, that was a joke, but that's not enough." "Early enough for you?" he asked. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends." I opened my eyes and we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. Steak knife in hand. Oh, he's funny, you know. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to the new vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed that deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me, but I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children. Oh, I actually feel a bit sly on Mr. Widemouth. I was picturing a Furby, but like light blue coloured, like a sky, like a bright light blue, if you know what I mean. I was picturing that, and I was just picturing him standing on the windowsill with a steak knife in hand, looking all sad. I always feel sorry for him when I hear it, and I know he tried to get you to jump onto a fake trampoline, onto some brick outside, and he tried to take you down the deer trail to a cemetery, and he tried to get you to juggle with knives, but he's a bit of a laugh, isn't he? He's a laugh, Mr. Widemouth. And the fact that the house burned down, that was probably due to him trying to say to a kid, "I found these matches, you should play with them, I want you to try," you know. Well, that is the end of this week's episode. I'm sorry, it felt a bit rushed. Like, I've just spent all that time recording it. I'm not joking, I literally edited it all and was trimming the little start bits, and I'd trimmed it wrong, and I had to do it all again. Oh, can't believe I did that, but it's done now, so I'm sorry if that felt rushed. I felt like I went through everything really fast then. But as I said, they've all got more comments on each of them stories, so just have a little read or a long read with a nice cosy time by yourself or with your friends under some candlelight or something. But yeah, I have a little read. Also, if you have any imaginary friends, let me know. Comment below or send me a message or go on social media. Tell me about your experience of imaginary friends because I want to know. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I enjoyed it in the end after me recording it twice. Join us again next Sunday for a special St. Patrick's Day episode. Ooh! Hear about some real life leprechaun sightings on that one. So make sure you join us for that one. And I'll see you next Sunday at 12 p.m, same as every week. Thanks so much for listening and goodbye.